Lovely to see you all here this evening. It's a big turnout. It's great. Cy Turner. Well, I'm going to state the bleeding obvious because he's a man who loves mountain bikes, but not just riding them, but making them as well, which has led to him being the founder and driving force behind Cotic bikes. He has an excellent team, but it's difficult not to describe him pretty much as head cook and bottle washer. He's managing director, technical director, mechanical and designer, financial director, head of marketing, mechanic, shipping clerk, and tea maker. He's a committed family man, keen radio-controlled car geek, Lego fan, and Star Wars aficionado, and has been a major part of Ride Sheffield from the very start. Now, feel free to chip in on the chat line. I'll trawl through to find the tough questions like what's his favourite colour. And last week, Cy Bounds stole my favourite question when he was interviewing the amazing Anila McKenna, available on YouTube right now. So I'm stealing it right back, Cy. Here we go, mate. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Who first put you on a bike and did it have stabilisers?
I would guess my dad was the first person to put me on a bike, and it did have stabilizers. Yes, it did. No, none of this balance bike rubbish for a child of the 70s. So, yeah.
And how quickly did you migrate onto non-stabilizers? How quick did it happen, mate? How quickly did you just love biking?
It was fairly, yeah, I don't think I was especially early with it. I think I was 4 when I got my bright yellow Rally Boxer, and that was the last bike I had that had stabilizers on it. So I guess they must have come off sometime in the summer of 1980. And yeah, that was it. It was one of those things. I grew up in a village just north of Bedford, and my best friend was a bit older than me, but he was the son of the farmer. So we just used to razz around the farm on our bikes when we were like 5 or 6. We'd just go and ride all over the farm because you could really. I guess thinking back on it, Christ, I've not thought about this for a long time. But I guess thinking back on it, because he got a mini moto, so we'd go and ride down the dirt tracks on the farm, and I would desperately try and keep up with him on my bike. So I guess that was probably my first introduction to off-road riding, even though I was 5.
And when or how quickly did mountain biking become all consuming? Or were you a road rider first, mate?
No. I've done the occasional bit of road riding when I was training for racing, but no, it was always after that bike. It was I had a BMX because it was the mid-80s. It was actually a pretty nice one, so we just used to razz around on those. I did have a racer briefly, just because that was the next thing you went on to when you grew out of a BMX, really. But it was just a rally, like just a Bogo rally. But I got my first. But yeah, just the thought of just mountain bikes just seemed. I remember seeing a local kid on a Peugeot Ranger in what must have been about 1985. And just thinking it was just the coolest looking thing. It was just loved the idea of this, and they just started being a bit more popular, I guess. And Rally were making loads of bikes. Obviously Rally was still like the thing that you got bought, you got a Rally bike when you were a British kid in the 80s. That was what you got. And they'd started making mountain bike shaped bicycles because they were more robust than the racers that we were knocking about on before. So yeah, it was a bit of that. So yeah, I got my first mountain bike Christmas 1987.
And what was that?
It was a rally montage. I was 11 years old, 21-inch frame because you'll grow into it. I've never had a bike that big since.
Really? You're 6'8".
Yeah, not in terms of seat tube length. It was 21 inches horizontal top tube.
Yeah.
Years old.
And
absolutely hilarious.
Obviously, you were then smitten with mountain biking, but then as time went on, you started racing. How early did you start racing?
Racing came along when I was about fifth. So it was the summer of my GCSE. So 15, 16. I was a junior. I never raced youth. So yeah, you start racing junior. That's the year of your 16th birthday, don't you? That's so yeah. It's yeah. So I got proper. So I crashed around on mountain bikes. Loved it. Read MB UK from like issue 3. And I had a couple of other bikes in the meantime. Had a Marin Eldridge, which I absolutely loved. And then had, pardon?
Eldridge was hardtail?
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is 1990. It was the first
course,
Marin Eldridge. So it was yeah, a very hard, full rigid, first generation oversized steel, rode like a pneumatic drill. Absolutely loved it. And then I got a rally with the first generation rock shocks on it, which was promptly stolen, which was a good thing because the first generation rock shocks were terrible and the bike wasn't built for them.
Was that the activator then? The rally?
No. It's called a Rally Summit. It was actually proper. It was proper RS1s.
Okay.
And then I got my, and by that point I'd done I did work experience at the local rally dealer when I was 14. So I knew the guys at the shop, and Rally had just come out with these Dynatex, these bonded tie and aluminium and steel frames. And the cheapest one was full rigid, but a bit less money than we got on the insurance for my Summit. And I bought that, and that was the best thing I could have done, because because riding around, mountain biking in the 90s and in Bedfordshire, it's just riding around the edges of fields and crashing down through woods, and it was just perfect. It was so good. Yeah. Loved that bike.
And the racing you were doing, mate, was that cross country or down?
Yeah. Well, that was it. So I got that bike, and then once I got that bike and got a bit more into it, and the guys at the shop started riding with a local club, the local time trial club. One of their guys got into mountain biking, a young guy a few years older than me. And he started an off-road section, just doing rides on a Sunday. So I started riding with them when I was 15. And then that rolled into the Southeast Midlands. They started an inter-club series with a bunch of other local clubs. So I did a couple that year. First one was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. It was at a used motocross track. I was so unprepared, just didn't know what I was doing. It was, I'm amazed I went back. But I did another one that our clubs race later in the summer and did all right. And then the following year, I don't know why, came out of nowhere, because I am useless at almost all other sports, like certainly school sports, and anything like that. And I'm not especially competitive either. And I just suddenly decided that I was going to race the whole championship, and I was going to try and win it. I don't know where it came from. I remember telling the guys at the shop, and they laughed at me, and I was like, right. So there's probably an element of male ego involved as well. But yeah, I started training then. But I couldn't afford a road bike, so I used to change my mountain bike tires to Specialized Fat Boy slicks and go road riding on that. I didn't get a road bike until I was at university.
And did you win?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
And that is the oldest continuously running race series in the UK. Still runs. I got contacted a few years ago. Started in 1992. I won the junior title in 1993.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Great, mate. I know. I'd never heard that before. I guess an obvious question. The next question is, did you have a love for the technical side of bikes from the outset? Was that, you know?
Oh yeah.
You were just born an engineer, weren't you?
Yeah. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I feel really, really sorry for people who don't know what they want to do, because they get to all of these options that they have to choose from like the age of 13 or 14, and and they go, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was just, yeah, I'm going to design things. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to design bits of anything, mechanical, anything. Yeah, I used to draw bikes, design bits. I used to write lists of like the specs of my favorite bikes just from like going through the magazines and stuff. Yeah, always.
So were you fiddling with your own bikes? Were you?
Yeah. I designed a front hub that my dad had made for me for my 16th birthday, 17th birthday, something like that. I designed a stiffer front hub for my bike. I designed some cantilever brakes that I had on my bike when I went to university. Yeah, just used to design stuff, and then that sort of escalated into starting to design frames as I understood things.
Yeah. So, and then obviously university, engineering.
Yeah.
And then you ended up being a railway fanatic.
I think fanatic's probably a bit strong. I've always been interested in the railways, but no, that it was a really, really good job. It was a really good job. It was, and I wanted to stay in Nottingham after my university. That was a key thing. There's not.
You went to Nottingham, Nottingham.
I went to the University of Nottingham, so I wanted to stay living in Nottingham, and there wasn't a lot of heavy engineering jobs round there. And I'd been to a couple of other interviews. Like I went to a Ford assessment centre in Dunton in Essex, and I was just like, it's okay, thanks. So I wanted to stay in Nottingham, and this job came up. They'd started taking graduates on again after the privatisation in Derby, and it was amazing. It was so good. They had a graduate training programme. Man, I learned so much. And they were the nicest guys. Just because I was actually enthusiastic about engineering, they just were like these guys in their 50s, just absolutely loving it. It was so good.
And so, in a sense, was there a link between that learning process and bikes? Is that engineering?
Oh, completely. Everything I did until I started Cotic and went full time with Cotic in the rail industry was teaching me about doing Cotic, because I basically learned to be a professional engineer. You don't leave university with an engineering degree knowing how to be an engineer. You have some tools in your toolbox, but you are nowhere near the finished product. I learned more in the first 3 years out of university than I did in the 3 years I was there. And I was fortunate. I mean, I think a lot of people, if they're passionate about engineering and they get into a good place, with a big group of experienced people, they'll learn a lot, because if you're passionate about it, then people recognize that. But I met some fabulously inspiring people who I still think of a great deal today and still owe a lot to today.
So what we're getting the drift of is that, okay, you might have been inspired by a few mountain bikers, but actually it was engineers who inspired you more. And when did you decide to make that first bike?
So when was it? So basically, I ended up downhill racing in kind of 98, 99, 2000, a little bit in 2001. And it was all getting a bit too high risk for my liking. The tracks were developing into the kind of thing we have today. Really, it was getting a bit sendy and a bit high risk. And I'm not that kind of rider. I'm a sort of fast across the ground kind of rider. So I stopped downhill racing, and I wanted to rebuild myself a hardtail for going riding, riding around on. And I've always loved steel for hardtails. I've had various different bikes, but for a hardtail, I always just preferred the feel of it. So I picked up a 99 Kona frame from a local bike shop. It was the last of the one of the last of the steel Konas, actually, until they started making them recently, but one of the last classic steel Konas. And it's too small for me and all of that kind of thing. But I really missed all of the stuff that I had on my downhill bike. I missed the big grippy tires, and I missed the short stem and the snappy handling, and I missed proper stiff forks, and I missed disc brakes and all of this kind of stuff. And I sort of grafted some of that stuff onto the bike, and it didn't really fit me very well, but it kind of worked, and it was fun. So I, as a bit of a shed project, I just set about measuring it up and then working out what shape a bike would look like in order to fit me better and take these forks properly and have proper clearance and all of these kinds of things. And that frame design was the original soul. And I was going to make it out of Reynolds 853 because I had a rally downhill bike, which actually was made out of Reynolds 853. So obviously I geeked up on it and found out it's this amazing steel. So I thought, well, that's super strong. So you can't, winner. So yeah, I just designed the bike, and I asked Dave Yates to build me one just for my own amazement. But the single track forum was already up and running by then, and I was a relatively active member early on. And I mentioned that I was, designing this bike and I was going to get it made and what have you, just as a bit of a conversation thing. And people were asking me about it, and I was saying what it was going to be. And Sean, who was one of the founding members of Single Track, spotted it, and he was a good mate of Brant Richards. So and he got in touch with me and saying, well, this sounds like a really interesting idea for where the market is at the moment. I know Brant, and I mean, like I said, I was reading MBUK from issue 3, so I knew exactly who Brant Richards was. And he was already doing On One, which was the first kind of small batch Taiwan direct to market thing. So he said, do you mind if, can I put you two together? So we did, and we hit it off, and I sent him a full production drawing of a frame rather than a fag packet sketch. And he was like, oh, okay. And he said, this looks good. I said, I could agent these for you. I could get you a price for 100 of them. I was like, oh, right. Okay. So I chatted to a few of my mates, and we just sort of sat down and worked out that I could do it from my bedroom, and my mate, who still does, could do my website, and my other mate could do the photos and the logos. And I wouldn't have to give up my day job. And if I only sold 3, I could still afford the loan that I'd need to buy them. So at that point, we were just like, well, there's nothing on the line here. We could get some cool bikes. That was my business plan.
And what were the when you put the soul together, what were the things you really went for that were slightly different, or what did you want to do to make that a better bike?
So it was, although there were some frames out there at the time with similar features, none of them was steel. It was the time when steel was really, really unfashionable. And anything that still was steel was still like it was from 1995, all sort of noodly and flexy and with 130mm stem. So mine was much longer for a radically short 80 or 90mm stem. And it was designed for long travel, 100mm to 125mm forks. But it's basically properly designed around around longer forks and a better weight distribution, and it had tire clearance at the back for 2.5 tires, and it had disc brake mounts front and rear, and it was made out of bigger section thin wall tubing than current bikes were, so it was a little bit stouter and a little bit a little bit more capable feeling. So yeah, they were all the designs. So yeah, everything you've heard from every bike designer trying to improve anything ever, basically.
Yeah, and obviously the big question is, why was your love affair with steel? Why was that the big thing for you?
Well, like I say, I've pretty much always loved. I mean, I started early enough that you could only get steel bikes, and then I got. I had a couple of aluminium hardtails, and they're obviously back in the 90s very unsubtle compared to what you can get these days. But I just found them really harsh and really unforgiving. And I wasn't that bothered about the fact that they were a bit lighter than a steel frame, because it just, in the grand scheme of a whole bike, it just didn't seem to make that much difference to me. And on the other side of that, I'd had this. So the Dynatech was bonded, cheap Russian chemical plant tubing, titanium tubing. That's one of the reasons why it's bonded. It wasn't tricky tubing. That's why the bikes were so cheap. But it had a chromo rear end and these tie main tubes, and even though it was a rigid bike, it was sublimely comfortable to ride. It was such a slinky, thing to ride, across chattery ground, to the point where my following bike was a really high end, like True Temper steel frame, and it felt harsher than the Dynatech, despite the fact it was still pretty skinny and rigid forks and all of that kind of stuff. So I just sort of, at that point, I guess my preferences had kind of been sort of shaped by those experiences, but I just sort of knew that there was a way in which you could design a bike that went with that's my sort of stock phrase is, it breathes with the trail. It doesn't try and pound it into submission. And that whole ethos of the bike breathing with the trail is what I wanted, what I love about steel. It's what I still love about steel, and it's what I bring to all of my bikes even now.
And finally, I've remembered, I originally had a Kona Explosive. Was that the steel frame you got?
No, it wasn't as trick as that. It was a Kona Caldera, so it was just it was their mid-range chromo hardtail, the exact same geometry and the classic Kona shape. I've still got it in the garage.
Have you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it had rack mounts on it, so we kept it when we had the kids. We put a rack on it with a kiddie seat. That was it was Jen's bike for a while, for quite a while, just riding around with Lauren on the back. And
still going. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to move it on a bit now, because from a 26-inch sole to a 29-inch long shot Rocket Max.
Yes.
Did you see that coming, Si?
No.
Things change so massively, don't they? I mean,
well, they change so fast now. They change so fast. So that sole geometry served us as pretty much our only hardtail geometry for nearly the first 10 years of the company's life. And we're now changing bikes every 18 months to 2 years. So yeah, it's moving. It moves so fast now. But there's an element because of the markets we've got into and the capacity we now have to do it. But but there's another thing that goes on with it as well, is that so 29-inch wheels I went for earlier than, well, not early, but I think the Solaris was 2011, 12, something like that, sort of and again, just with the sole ethos of designed for the Americans seem to be obsessed with maintaining the wheelbase of a 26-inch bike at the time, and ended up with these bikes with 73-degree head angles and really weird shapes, and people were wondering why there was no uptake of 29ers. So which just seemed crazy to me. So I just designed it like a bike. So it had a longer rear end, which made room for the wheel, which offset the longer front end as a result of the 29-inch wheels and the big forks and everything. I managed to get hold of some RockShox forks with a bolt through axle. What do you know? It's quite good. Design it like a bike and it's quite good. So we went for 29-inch wheels relatively early on, but we weren't sold on the 275 thing. We heard kind of rumors. There were kind of little whispers around 2012, 2013 that it was, that might be coming. And we just went into typical, almost like cynical consumer mode, certainly grumpy engineer mode, just like, what the flipping heck is this all about? There's nothing wrong with 26-inch wheels. We've got 29-inch wheels. Why are we bothering with all of this? I remember going to Eurobike in 2013, and you remember what 275 was like? It was like a model year change, wasn't it? It was like Trek and Giant and a couple of the other big brands just went, 26 is dead. And I turned up at Eurobike 2013 and went, oh, my company's in trouble. Because we had this reputation for 26-inch hardtails that we were still making. And we did the fastest development we've ever done. So from that point in September 2013 to signing off prototype 275 soles was September, October, November. 10 weeks.
Wow.
Because we had to. The first batch of Sol 275s should have been a batch of Sol 26s. I've still got the top tubes at Carver that we didn't use. Just because it was that fast to change, and we thought, I was like, we're toast if we don't sort this.
So in a way, you're dealing with the changes now. You're having to be much more flexible in the way that you're looking at bike design, or you're just taking it on a bit further yourself now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Geometry and so on.
But what that taught me a lesson about was being open. Now, actually, it was a life lesson, because I'm a lot happier person these days as a result of this lesson. But it's about act from a position of knowledge and don't be cynical about things until you've tried them. Because it made me, I said, well, that nearly killed us. And if there's more stuff like this coming, I've got to have it. If I hear a whisper about something, I need to be more plugged into the industry and I need to be on it. I need to test it. And if we don't do it, that's fine. But if I've got a good reason and I've done it, then that's fine. But if we do it, it means we're in the vanguard and we're doing it. So you just get a bit more open-minded and a bit more, and you get excited about stuff again.
Yeah.
Rather than just being cynical, oh God, we're changing it for change's sake. You actually just look at it on the flip side, because as much as people like to say that it is, this industry isn't filled full of con artists trying to sort of separate you from your money. It's filled full of people who are just crazy committed to making better bikes. And the thing is that some of those guys at some of those really big brands have got the resources to be able to make relatively large changes to what everyone is doing. And we sort of get sucked along a bit in the slipstream. So as a result of that, I was just sort of much more open to things. And that was where Longshot came from, really, because I'd been following Chris Porter's work, talking about these longer bikes, and it's sort of, and I was interested from a design, because he's obviously sort of thought this through. And we got chatting, and he ended up coming and doing a tech talk up in Sheffield. JPJ brought him up. We did it at the Sawmill.
Yeah. I remember that.
It was really good. It was a really good night. So I went to this tech talk and listened to what Chris had to say, and we had a bit of a chat afterwards. And he said, "Si, you've just got to try it. Just got." So I'm going to go and get my bike out, and I was like, "Okay." So I jumped on his Geometron at the time, which was 520 reach, 63 odd degree head angle. It's basically, it's not far off what the Rocket Max eventually became after my own levels of iteration, but crazy long slack bike for the time.
Yeah.
And your received wisdom part of your head is going, this is all completely ridiculous. And then I literally took it for a ride around a dark car park and went, this feels like a bike. Just felt like a bike. And that was the point at which I thought, right, I need to get on this.
And there's no question, is there? I mean, when we think about what we first wrote,
we were riding even what I was riding pre-long shot, that time, end of 2015, what I was riding then, I mean, yes, I was using a longer stem, but the actual reach, the frame layout was shorter than our current medium.
No, it's incredible. My first bike was a Kona Lava Dome, about the size of a 5-bar gate. So I reckon it was even bigger than your 21-inch bike. And now you're riding something that is just so forgiving, and you're able to have so much fun on.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's it. It's about, and that's what I mean about people just wanting to get, when we first started doing long shot bikes, I was just like, and I was so excited to get people on them. So excited, because I mean, I know that the industry's kind of caught up a bit, now it's sort of almost like standard geometry these days, but like 3 years ago when we first introduced it, 3.5 years ago, people were like, bloody hell, this seems a bit different. I'm just like, just ride it. Just ride, it's so good. It's just like I was so excited to get someone on a bike. So because
ride it.
I first rode the long shot prototype, the very first prototype, it was just like ding.
And ride it somewhere like Golfing. I mean, anywhere steep and technical like that.
Oh yeah,
like that is just heaven.
Yeah. And it is, and it's not even about necessarily the travel of the bike if it's the right shape. Because I went up there with a few mates a couple of years ago, and they'd never been before, and they're my mates who I've met through kids' school. So I don't think any of them would be insulted to say they're not quite at my level. We go for a good pedal and a pint kind of thing. But they wanted to come up, so we did some stuff at Innerleithen. They had a really, really good time. But I was like, guys, look, I'm in Innerleithen. I am going to the Golfy. I'm not going. I have to go up there. And they were like, okay, we'll give it a go. So I took them down Lone Wolf, which was like the only one I could think of, which was slightly less spicy than anything else.
Yeah.
And they would like they had their eyes properly open, but a couple of them had kind of liked it, and one of them was just like nope. But we were riding back up the hill, and one of my mates said, well, is it the bike, which one of your bikes would you recommend for, if you're riding around here? And I was like, well, I was riding my Rocket Max, and I said, well, this is absolutely brilliant. But I just sat there and thought, like, pretty much anything. If I wasn't really hauling, I'd ride a Solaris down this. It's the right shape. It's got the short stem. It's like I could ride down half the stuff on the Golfy on the Solaris, I reckon, because it's the right shape. It's nothing to do with whether it's a hardtail or how much travel it's got. It's got a slack head angle and a long frame and a long wheelbase and a short stem. So it means that when you tip over those real steep bits, you're not going to get thrown out the front of the bike.
And I'm just going to quickly, I think there's a couple of questions come up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one from some bloke called Simon Bounds. What colour did that first batch end up?
You're a bad man, Simon. So the first batch of Soul frames were Barbie pink.
I don't see why that's a problem.
Well, it was a problem when they should have been dark grey. So we don't use RAL colours or Pantone colour. Well, we kind of use Pantone. We don't use RAL colours out in Taiwan. They have their own paint system called YS, and YS 817 is gloss dark grey. YS 718 is bright Barbie pink. Unfortunately, because Brandt ordered them, and Brandt had done some Barbie pink inbreds, the agent in Taiwan has gone, "Oh, Brandt's got this the wrong way around." So we open up these boxes. We didn't find out until we unloaded the container.
Did they sell well?
Brandt still enjoys trolling me with that picture, trying to smile, holding this frame.
And there's a question from Colin Shearer. So what's next, both for the industry and Cotic? Pinion gearboxes?
Not pinion gearboxes.
Maybe just gearboxes.
Maybe.
Gearboxes, not there yet.
Gearboxes are still a bit too coffee grinder. I think for most people. I think we're also in a situation like the internal combustion engine, apart from the fact that that's being legislated out of existence, but we're in a situation like the internal combustion engine where a not necessarily optimal solution was arrived at 50 years ago and has now been massaged to a point where it is so good that the vast majority of riders just aren't bothered about the extra expense or what have you of a gearbox. So yeah, I mean, Shimano produced a patent recently about a gearbox, but it's not entirely clear whether they're actually developing something or just stopping someone else developing it, but it looked like a mech in a box. Don't know. Certainly I don't think gearbox drivetrains, apart from on somebody puts a gearbox in an e-bike drivetrain, that would be sensible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you've got a big bracket on there anyway. You've got a motor which gets with a gearbox in it anyway. I mean, that would be sensible. Like a gearbox e-bike would be sensible. I don't see analog bikes going that way anytime soon.
Okay, so Cotic were created. You got Kate Potter on board, didn't you? Early days.
Yes.
Yeah. But you've also had quite a few Sheffield guys who joined your team. I mean, they've been amazing, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah. Having the race team over the years has just people doing amazing things that I would never have expected with my bikes is always just such a treat. Just used to watching Swinney and Che ride, and in these conditions, I went out and joined them at the EWS in Finale a couple of years ago, and they're just fast in a way I don't understand. I just love just taking it in, and because I set out, Cotic set out to be a bike for riding, for trail riding. I never really made race bikes. We made the Soda, which was the titanium version, so it was lighter, and people started picking them up for doing the sort of endurance racing at the time, which is how Kate ended up on the team. But she ended up getting selected for the World Championships. So I've got a photo of a Cotic being ridden at a World Championships, which I would never have expected. It's just so special.
I mean, even your chief mechanic is pretty quick, isn't
he, mate? Yeah, the king of Jewel.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. We better not go into that. I think this is a question that could be taken in a number of ways, but there must be a subtle balance between your love of bikes and the challenge of running a business. Does that ever become a collision?
Oh yeah. That's what these are for.
Oh, of course.
When you work in the bike industry, full stop, but very particularly when you ride bikes with your name on it, effectively, and you're having a bad time at work, bikes isn't an escape anymore. It does get claustrophobic. So I've had some difficult periods where I've not loved riding a bike because work was bad. And the thing with it, more than anything, and it's like everyone goes through cycles with riding bikes, that you just need to let it breathe. Don't beat yourself up about, if you normally ride three times a week and you just don't fancy it, for 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be back. Just don't push it. Go and find something else to do. Read a book, tinker with an RC car,
do some Lego.
Do something. That the reason why these are really good for me is because they're mental white noise. They're engaging enough and interesting enough that I find it stimulating, but they're not difficult enough to find it frustrating particularly often. So they're like, so they just completely absorb me, so I can't think about anything else. That's having a and up to a point, that's one of the reasons why when bikes, when day job is fine and bikes can still be the escape, that's why I prefer mountain biking to road riding.
Yeah.
Because when I go for a road ride, I'm just in my head the whole time. And some people like that, and sometimes I enjoy it in terms of the process of just turning over a problem or something like that. But actually the mountain biking absorbs me, and you just get into that kind of very zen sort of flow state where you're very present, and that's increasingly rare these days.
But that Sidebounds bloke used the term Lego can be meditative.
Oh yeah, absolutely, completely.
It just takes you away.
Yeah.
Because we can all get in that position where, for whatever reason, you're just not riding quite as well as you normally do, and it bugs you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When that's been such a major part of your life.
Mm.
So yeah, doing something different.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely a good thing. I guess the next big question is, how difficult was it organising the production of frames in the UK? Because that was a tough time, wasn't it, initially?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So in 2013 and 2014, I co-founded a business called Bicycle Manufacturing Limited, which is still owned by my erstwhile business partner. And we went in with a lot of naivety and not a good enough plan. And in the end, the personalities didn't gel, the stress got to us, and we didn't end up making anything. And it was just one of those things. There was fault on both sides. I definitely didn't know enough or plan well enough. I didn't, there was there was definitely a lot of naivety. So whilst I can't remember the last time I spoke to Mike, but I don't wish him any ill will at all. It just didn't work out with us. So that was, that was a particularly difficult period through the end of 2014 because we committed to it instead of making stuff in Taiwan. That was the big. So the money slowly bled out of Cotic instead of there being a background of sales going on. Of the rocket, that was what we were hoping to make over here. And that was one of the bad decisions I made, which added to the stress. So yeah, like I say, but learned a lot. I definitely don't regret it.
And now,
but because as a result of it, I kept pushing the little avenues. I'm looking for this option. And in the end, it was Matt and Callum, who are Five Land Bikes, who are our current supplier. They were working at Shand at the time, and I know Stephen, who he sold it now, but Stephen, the owner, really well. And when they were a bit quiet, Steve would let me know, and they actually built the first 2 or 3 long shot prototype front triangles for me. Matt actually made a couple of those frames, and then he and Callum were looking to set up their own thing, which was less custom than, because basically, you know, Shand ended up being all, you know, every frame is different, and they wanted to get into a situation where they were making sort of beat rate production stuff. So they talked to me about it, and it was just a perfect fit, really, in terms of the volume we wanted, what they could provide. You know, they're brilliant guys, and it just works. We just sort of work, you know, sort of hand in glove with them, really, on. And my goodness, it's been a godsend in the last couple of years. I mean, even just recently, you know, we've had, you know, we've had a second batch of jets which are delayed, so we just ran. So in August, we just ran another run of UK made ones, and yeah, they're a little bit more expensive, but they're actually available. You know, like, and you know, with a couple of other things that have sort of arrived in the meantime, we're actually in a position at the moment where, you know, assuming there's a size color in stock, you could order one today and have one on Friday, kind of thing, which is, you know, that's not usual in the industry at the moment.
And that's the cool thing, is so many frames are made in Taiwan, and actually making some frames in the UK is just the best.
It's nice feeling, but it's more about spread. It's just about, for us, it's about spreading the risk. Because we're not big enough to have multiple vendors over in the Far East. Whenever we try it, my agent tries it, there's just a sort of an attitude with how they work over there, that once the volumes get below a certain level, or they find out that you're using one of their competitors, they're just not that interested anymore. So we've ended up going sort of eggs in one basket to eggs in another basket, and like the UK made thing just keeps us flexible. And it also means we can develop real fast, because they're making because Matt and Callum are making our prototypes for us now, which means that we can develop so much faster than we could if we were still using Taiwan.
Yeah. Well, let's move on from industry. You've helped out Ride Sheffield over the years, mate, quite a lot. What's your opinion of the rest of the industry and their support for volunteer groups around the country, or actually just helping out mountain biking in some way?
It feels like, I don't know, I perhaps don't follow some of the bigger brands well enough to know. I mean, obviously the big thing at the moment is, you know, Santa Cruz have done pay dirt in the last year or so, which is fantastic, but it feels like it was a long time coming. And I know that there's a bunch of I get the impression from what I see that there's a lot of component suppliers who are very up on a lot of this stuff, because I know that there's people like One Up and PNW and people like that, a lot of the Canadian sort of Pacific Northwest kind of component suppliers do a lot of advocacy kind of support. And I know Trek put a lot into advocacy, but I think it's in a broader bicycle, you know, bicycles as transport, bicycles as a good thing kind of way, rather than mountain biking specifically. Although they supported those Rays indoor places in America for a while, didn't they? They're like repurposed warehouses and stuff like that. So there's definitely stuff going on. So
you think it's changing? Do you think it's slowly? I mean, I think Santa Cruz are making a difference, and Trek have made a difference. So,
Well, with the amount of money that they're putting in, they're making a difference. I mean, there's a lot of small brands like ours, and like I say, a lot of these component manufacturers who are doing bits and pieces. But when they can put like millions in, that's, you know, that's a big difference.
yeah, and it is kind of finally, you know,
Yeah.
maybe they've been worried about, you know, big business or being a big business, and now they feel that they've got the cash to actually help out. So maybe things are changing. Yeah.
I hope so. I certainly hope that it becomes an example that others are led by, that others follow. It's super important.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that it's not just about new trails. That's the thing that I think you need to, it's actually about maintaining, a lot of the time it's about putting money in to help people maintain what we've already got due to the increased traffic levels that we're experiencing as more people take up the sport.
Definitely. And liaising with those people who own the land. That's the big thing. But it's difficult for volunteer groups to do that unless they're getting help. So mountain biking is going through an interesting phase. We're being viewed by some of the authorities as a threat and others as a bonus. What's your opinion on how we're being viewed?
I find it surprising that we're being seen as a threat again. It just feels like retreading old, you know, the argument that was already won. Because it does, you know, even in the UK, you know, even though we have somewhat reasonable access, even in the UK, certainly in England and Wales, we don't use vast quantities of the countryside. We don't have access to huge amounts of it. So it's, so it feels slightly odd to be viewed in that way. But I think it's a momentary thing due to the general increase in usage of the countryside across the board. Because it's not just mountain bikers. You just get people labeling all sorts of, you know, groups of people that aren't them as, you know, irresponsible idiots for, you know, leaving the, you know, and I do, whilst I don't agree with the sort of labeling different tribes kind of thing, the people who, you know, the people who are new to the countryside and are leaving litter everywhere, and or new to the countryside and don't necessarily know about access laws, not even access laws, but just sensitive access, which is still a massive issue with mountain biking. Just because you can go there just doesn't mean you ought to, in, you know, in these particular conditions. That's a big bugbear of mine.
Well, yeah, I think the big question is, how has mountain biking got to challenge those negative perceptions? Is there more we've got to do to actually do the right thing?
It's difficult to know, because I feel like because I float around in a, you know, on the edge of a relatively righteous bubble that is Ride Sheffield, where we have good relationships with land managers and we have access to a huge amount of outdoors. So, and obviously as a result of COVID, I've not really been anywhere else for the last 2 years. So, I feel like I'm a little bit under-equipped to, you know, to say anything. I mean, I think the whole thing with land is that they don't make it anymore, and the people who control the access have got that very old school sort of wealthy landowner feel of like, hold it all back. And it just seems to me that as more and more people want to get access to the countryside in any way, shape or form, is that you're only going to make things better by, it's supply and demand. You're only going to make things better by actually opening up access in a managed way. That's the only way. You're not going to stop people coming.
No.
You're just not. if people will just go anyway, particularly the walkers with the Crow Act. They are coming anyway, so you may as well just get over it and do it in a way that suits you as a landowner, and engage with these people and maybe make a bit of money out of it, out of the car parking or a coffee concession. It just seems like, we're so lucky, aren't we?
Yes. Locally, we've got land managers who just have an amazing relationship with mountain bikers. But then you spot what goes on elsewhere, and you think, oh, it's just so wrong, so wrong.
Yeah, I think rolling back to the advocacy thing, I think there's an issue of, I mean, slightly, and particularly this feels a little bit more aimed at e-bikes than regular bikes, although it's anyone who's coming into the sport and anyone who's coming into the countryside from new, is that bit of the education piece is missing from the purchase experience. We as cycling as an industry, unlike a lot of other outdoor pursuits, I mean, literally, like if you want to go walking, you don't even have to buy walking boots, just drive there, turn up, go for a walk, so the ability at point of sale to start the conversation about responsible access is not available. But in cycling we have it, and we have this opportunity when these people are buying a new bike, and you can tell if you work in a bike shop, that you're selling a bike to someone who's never biked before. It's just, and you say to them, right, you really ought to buy a helmet, you really ought to buy this, you really ought to understand where you are and aren't allowed to go.
Absolutely.
It's that's the bit that's missing, and we've got the opportunity in our industry to do it. It's just that it's missing from the brands and the shops at that point of sale. That information is missing, that drive to get people to understand and engage in the countryside, and in a way that means that when we're seen as less of a menace.
One of our local land managers, Danny Udall, who is a tremendous supporter. His big thing is exactly that: education. He knows people are going to come in and maybe do the wrong things. But he wants to educate them so they can enjoy the countryside without damaging it. So that's man, he is the best.
Absolutely.
And we wish there was more like him.
Completely.
Few quick questions then, Si. Is Strava a negative?
Yes.
Okay. I like that. Simple question. But are e-bikes entirely positive to the mountain biking world? That might be a bit of a long one, won't it? Yeah or no?
Not entirely positive, no.
Entirely positive.
No.
A question from Roy. If you had not started Cotic, what bike would you be riding?
Oh, we sometimes have this conversation at work, actually. I suspect I would be riding either a Geometron or even though I'm not generally a fan of carbon bikes per se, I'm an absolute sucker for how Mondrakers look, and they've got proper, and they're one of the originators of proper geometry as well. So those bikes have, they're proper geo. I just love how they look. So yeah, probably a Geometron or a Mondraker, probably.
Favorite place local, favorite place elsewhere.
Favorite place local, I can't say in public.
Just an area. So.
Well, my favorite place local is Blackamoor. It's my local. It's my local, and it's ace. Favorite place. favorite place anywhere, I would still say the Golfie is still my favorite place to ride anywhere in the world. And I've been to some great places, but it just, the way it suits me as a rider, and just love it. I absolutely love the Golfie. Riding Lone Wolf like my hair's on fire. There you go.
I ride everything. My hair's on fire, if I had any.
Yeah.
From Michael, when will the Cotic balance bike be available?
It's not something we've ever got into, really. No, there's plenty of other people doing a really good job of that.
Yeah. How's your experience of riding in the Peak District changed over the years? Have you felt it moving on, that people are more accommodating now? Or?
Well, I never really felt, I mean, I started riding the Peaks regularly in 2001 from Hope area, and I never found a particular problem, really. We never really encountered much of an issue, because the thing about it around there is that there are a huge number of bridleways, but there's an even larger number of footpaths. So actually, I never, in the sort of those 10 years where I spent a lot of time in that area riding very regularly, I never really found a lot of conflict. No, I've not. And these days, I don't actually ride right out in the Peak all that often.
Not even Win Hill, so.
Oh, I do ride Win Hill, but just even then, it's not that often.
Ah, right.
Yeah, it's probably a few times a year.
But they're pretty cool trails, aren't they?
Oh, they're amazing trails. Yeah. Amazing trails. Actually, if you want to call it, it depends how local you call local. So I don't consider that local, but Gift That Keeps On Giving is my favourite trail that's which is within a van drive.
Yeah, it's absolutely superb. Do laps on that, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and I think this might even be the final question, unless this one comes in from the audience. How cool is Sheffield and the Sheffield scene?
Very, enormously. I think, yeah, it's such a great place to live and ride and work in the outdoor industry. It's
and dual.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah. Well, no. Shh. No. Not too many people. No, Southerners like me.
Yeah, the house prices are getting silly already.
Last thing I'd like to say is ask everyone if they could donate. It's going to go to ShAFF, half of it, and the other half is going to go to Ride Sheffield. Matt, are we going to open things up a bit now and see if other people are coming in to ask questions? I've asked a few of those.
Yeah, why not? I shall allow people to unmute themselves. We'll keep your mug shots off just in case we don't want to stick people on YouTube, but people can speak now. So if anyone's got anything they want to say, then they asked a question that didn't get asked, then speak up.
Oh, Simon Archer's just said, thank you for making bikes, Si.
You're very welcome.
Si, when will we be able to do demos again, do you think, of Cotic bikes? Is that to do with stock? And I know
I can't get enough things to sell to people, let alone let people try it. It's a massive stock. It's also a staffing issue because the demo team are now almost completely fully employed on sales and mechanicking. So certainly we won't be going on the road anytime soon, because COVID is, regardless of what people tell you, COVID is still a massive problem. And I'm very wary of exposing my staff to it. But we do have a protocol in place for Carver demos, one-to-one. So we've got something ready to roll out when we can.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, we won't be on the. I would be very surprised if we were on the road next year at all.
but potential for one-to-ones at Carver if you're really desperate to try a model.
Yeah,
I know you've got that the option to buy and use, and
yeah,
you like it, yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing, is that's one of the reasons why we made a big thing about it. Yeah, we've got the love it or your money back thing. So yeah, ride the bike, and so long as it's not completely wrecked, you know, if it's in a sensible condition, you can ride it for a month, and if you don't like it, send it back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? What's that one?
Yeah, I think we're probably out of questions by the sound of it. Also,
Well,
the BFE Max painting delivery for December, is it still on track?
Should be. They are on the water. They were on the water over the weekend, so that puts it with us end of November. So yeah, should be December for those. They are actually built, packed and painted, so that's a big step forward.
Another one just come through. Well, there's a couple more come through.
Yeah.
How big a deal have the hardtail party reviews been for Cotic?
Massive. We've sold a bunch more Beefy Max and Solaris Max frames in the USA as a result of Steve's reviews. Yeah, it was brilliant for us. Almost feel like I need to do a new variation on one of the hardtails so we can send him another one. It's just he's really good. He's really good. I like Steve a lot. I really hope to meet him sometime.
And then should we make this the last one? How do you choose your suspension components?
Back in the day, it was as much to do with who would treat us like grown-ups as anything else, and which is why for a long time we were running with X-Fusion and Cane Creek, because whilst we never put anything on the bikes we don't like and haven't tested, they actually treated us like partners and valued customers, whereas the bigger brands were not interested. We're now at a point where we can afford to get one model line of Fox at their minimum order quantity. So we're still, even at our size, we're still a step away from doing Fox at proper OE. But we've got a brilliant relationship with RockShox now. You know, to the point where we now have access to all of their various different internal tunes as well. So so Cane Creek and RockShox are a lot of the time earlier on it was because of that's what we could get, but now we're allowed to pick and choose. And yeah, the Cane Creek and the RockShox stuff is fabulous, and you know, more than happy to put it on the bikes.
Well, if that's the last question, Matt, can I say thanks, Si? That's been a fascinating evening.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone for letting me dribble on.